This is for you.
Hey guys, what's going on? Eric here, bringing us some more D2 content. This time we're going over my 1000 runs of Eldritch, Shenk, Thresh Socket, and Pindle. This is going to be my last drop compilation until Season 2 starts. There's going to be a little bit of a lull as I get geared up until I can bring you a similar quality of videos, but I'll try to pump those out as soon as possible. Before we get into the runs, I had just over 500 magic find. The runs averaged approximately 1 minute, and there is a little bit of a delay between these runs, so if you guys want to tack on one of these bosses to like a nether run, so if you wanted to go kill Trav and then come kill Shenk, I totally recommend that. That way you won't have to deal with the delay. I found 28 worldstone shards, which is kind of horrible, so if you're looking for shards, farm cows or maps or someplace else because they did not drop here too often. And then lastly, I found 5.75 high runes. Most of them came from the Shenk area. I think it's because of the monster density. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like. And if you guys want to see more from me, especially some Season 2 content coming soon, subscribe. All right, let's get into the runs. The first noteworthy drop comes on the first run with a Viper, which is unfortunately Eth. 3 runs later, I find some +4 T-strokes for the first time in a while with some high ED. Again, another 3 runs later, I find my first Talbot with some decent MF. On run 23, I find a solid Widowmaker considering the ED range spans from 150 to 350. The very next run, I find my first Skiller, which is a sick 37 life Shapeshift GC. 10 runs later, I find my first pair of IK gloves, but I didn't note all the times they dropped during these runs. On run 48, the first noteworthy rune to drop is a Gold rune. The next run, I find another set piece with Nat's Helm. 4 runs later, I find a perfect 40 gold find Grand Charm. A couple runs later, I find my first Grizz Shield with anti-perfect res and only 2 sockets. On run 63, a pair of Laying of Hands drop with horrible damage to demons. The next run, some sick Eth Gores drop to potentially wear on my Merce. On run 73, another piece of the IK set drops with the boots. 5 runs later, the next Skiller drops. This time, it's a Trap GC. Moving into the next 100 runs, Thresh Socket drops a solid life Shaft Stop. On run 112, the first piece of the BK set drops, which I can't wait to try out in Season 2. 6 runs later, Shenk drops a 1.25 MF Skulder. Then Thresh Socket drops a super rare Astrian. I'll let you view the rolls. On run 122, Shenk drops a perfect ED Doombringer. I really wish this was Eth. A couple runs later, I find the always awesome to find Eth Trex. 20 runs later, I find another Viper, but this time it's actually usable even with the horrible res. I had to wait nearly 40 runs, but it was worth it when Eldritch drops a frickin' Jaw rune. 6 runs later, a much less exciting drop comes from Pindle with some Infernos. On run 194, a decent dual leech ring drops, which is mostly missing some stats. The first of many Mav bows drops on run 201 with some mid ED. 12 runs later, Thresh Socket pukes up a horribly rolled Tau's armor. On run 231, I find another piece of the Mav set with the gloves. 13 runs later, I find my first piece of the Alder set during these runs. Pull rune! A couple runs later, I find another pair of Infernos, but these ones roll damn near perfect. On run 259, I find a... Holy shit, is that a Zod rune? Did I seriously just find a Zod rune? Holy shit. I also found my first ever 2/2 Alder Helm. 9 runs later, I find this pretty cool green helm. A couple runs later, I find a less cool helm because it's not green. Finding yet another piece of the Mav set, Eldritch drops her belt. One of these days I'm going to find a Geed upgrade. Today isn't that day. Very next run, I find a 3 Shadow and 3 Socket Nats armor. Yet another Tau Bell drops. This time it's from Eldritch. Moving into the 300s, I find a perfect 10 gold find small charm. The next run, I find another useful gold find item, which obviously isn't an SOJ. On run 306, I find some +2 tier hunch in the hopes of slamming Cannot Be Frozen. 12 runs later, Pindle drops a mediocre T-God. The next run, I start off by finding some Frosties. Then, later, Pindle drops a solid Shrek Maw. A very useful all-res gold find GC drops to help out when I'm not wearing a fort on my barb. On run 333, I find some perfect 20% to pierce sea treads. A couple runs later, I find my first piece of Trangs during these runs with the helm. On run 347, I find Mav's armor, which only leaves the helm to complete the set. Later, I find a poorly rolled Shadow Killer. Six runs later, I find an Ormus with a useful skill, although I still don't think I'd ever use one. On run 365, I find some Mage Fists, which mages use to fist people. Run 370 brings some godly drops, and by godly I mean some whatever gloves. 14 runs later, I find a perfect 20 life small charm. Another noteworthy rune drops when I telekinesis an Ist out of this garbage can. Not long after breaking into the 400s, I find Trang's armor. Three runs later, I find a sick 20 life 6 poison res small charm. Yet another 10 gold find small charm drops on run 411. Finally, after a drought of 38 runs, I find a T-God with decent rolls. 6 runs later, I find a sick 12 to max stamina SC to help with my constant stamina drainage. A couple runs later, a Talham drops from Pindle. Neato. Set drops continue 6 runs later when I find some Nats boots. Not much later, I find a solid mid-rolled Verdungo. A couple runs later, I find a belt for a Keen. Another Doombringer drops, which again unfortunately rolls non-F. On run 476, I get my Eth item, but this time it's an Eldritch from Eldritch. Horrible rolls. 9 runs later, I find another piece of the Alder set with the boots. Halfway through the runs, I find a perfect 7MF small charm. On run 508, an item drops that I can't wait to find in Season 2 with the buffed rolls. Run 515 starts off with some Frosties. Then finishes with a mediocre Hand of the Blessed. Okay, so on run 524, this is like just fucking insane. I actually found a 25. Can you guys just enjoy this moment with me? Insane. The very next run, I find a solid Mercwep with an Eth Bonehew. I start off run 541 with some 220 Jav Gloves, then end with a useless Dragon Scale. Four runs later, I have a double drop from Eldritch with Mav's armor and a Shrek Maw. On run 562, I find my second Trang armor. This time it's actually +2. I find another Geed on run 570, which still isn't good enough to swap. Followed by some Water Walks with low life. A couple runs later, I find Atma's armor, which I later corrupted cannot be frozen on. On run 578, how low can you go? How low can you go? 12 runs later, another 20 life small charm, this time with some AR. On run 598, another crappy laying of hands. I've lost track of how many Infernos have dropped, but here's another pair. A couple runs later, another skiller drops. This time, it's a combat GC for the Pally. On run 616, I find a spike some random wizard dropped. The very next run, I find a Rubik's Cube due to some collateral damage. Thanks, random monster caught in harm's way. Ooh, a unique ring. You know the drill. On run 626, we examined some boots I meant to delete from this vid. I probably found 6 pair during these runs. More Nats boots as well on run 651. Did I mention more boots dropping that I found a lot of before? The same goes for this helm. Look at this perfect 3-socket 45 res Grizz shield. Makes me want to make a Fist of Heavens Pally in a Grizz set. On run 672, I find these Frosties to put on my hands because gloves go on hands. Oh my god, is that a Shaco? Holy shit, that's a Shaco right there. 13 runs later, another skiller drops. This time, it's a Bow GC from Eldritch. I don't know why this Butterfinger wizard keeps dropping his spikes, but I'll take it. On run 732, I find another useful 7MF small charm. 4 runs later, you know what time it is. It's Atma's dropping time. On run 738, I find some decent res boots and attempt to improve them. I think I succeeded. 20 runs later, I find the best Nagel? A decent ED Mavbow drops 9 runs later. The very next run, I find the other BK sword. Now I just need to find the ring. On run 786, the game wanted to remind me I didn't have enough Mavbows. The next run, the game wanted me to have more Ohm runes, and I'm not complaining. On the way to Thresh Socket, I popped this solid melee GC out of a trash can. Another double drop occurs when Pindle drops a solid VLF steel and a horrible Grizz armor. Another Alder Helm finds its way into our inventory, this time with only 1-2. After 28 runs, I decided to count this Nats Helm as a drop, even though I found a ton already. On run 851, I get another chance to upgrade my Geeds. Nope. My first ever 3-2 Fire Lizard drops a couple runs later. This thing is sick. A couple runs later, I find some 40+ War Travs, which are always fun to find. On run 860, I found an F+4 Ariox, and I wasn't sure if this is useful. Thoughts? Pole Rune! Moving into the home stretch, I find some perfect Alder boots on run 901. The next run, I find another pair of Frosties to cover up my frostbitten hands. On run 946, Eldritch drops a Tao's Mask. Then, I walk down the stairs to find a Dwarf Star and another Shrek Ball. Ten runs later, another noteworthy rune drops. This time, it's a Malamute. A couple runs later, I find a perfect Mav Belt. It's a little snug on me. On run 969, the game reminds me the season is ending, so it's just giving away Tau Masks. A crappy +1 Shadow Nats armor drops from Shenk on run 977. I don't want it. 9 runs later, I find a solid 39 ED Jewel, which I'm pretty sure I used to craft an amulet. And almost really godly Mana Leech ring drops on run 990. And finally, on run 997, the last item I find is a 32 DS 2 throw.